We'll start. I'm Councillor Ben Maney and I'll be the chair of the committee. I'd just like to remind everybody present that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the council's website. Moving on to the agenda, item 1 is to receive apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Holden and he's been substituted by Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, and thank you to Councillor Rigby for stepping in. Item 2 is to receive the minutes of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 18th of March. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? Councillor Kent.
Sorry, Chair. I've got a comment. It's not on the accuracy. It's on something that was hasn't been followed through properly yet. Do I leave that till later, or
no? Raise it now.
Yeah.
If it's
it's just the I asked the other few meetings ago about Grange Waters being taken off the asset register as assets to be sold, and we had the email come out this week, and it still has. From what I've read of the email, it's not been taken off the list. Although in the plans they said the 5-year plan is that we will still have Grange Waters, but I asked for it to be taken off the list or for work to be started, and I haven't had that confirmation, and I'd like that, please, and I'd like it to be minuted so that it's all official, if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll certainly minute that you've made that request. Is anyone able to respond to that briefly, or would a written response be better? I'm guessing Claire.
Thanks, Chair. I've gone back to the relevant officers and have asked for clarification. So as soon as we receive that, that will be sent back round to the committee.
Thank you. I know this is something that Councillor Kent has raised at a couple of meetings now, so if we could try and get that right, it would be much appreciated. So thank you. Okay, so I move that the minutes are approved. Is that agreed? Yep. Thank you. Item 3, are there any declarations of interest? There are none from me. Thank you. No declarations of interest. So, item 4 is a discussion paper regarding devolution and local governance reorganisation and programme activity. Could I ask Alex Powell to introduce the report, please?
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, everyone. So, you have before you a paper covering both devolution and local government reorganisation, and I just thought I would take a moment just to go through some of the basics of these two different programmes, because they're quite complex, and I think it's always helpful to just air one or two points about its purpose and how it's working and the drivers behind it. So if I can start with devolution. This is a programme that was brought forward by the government in their devolution white paper that was published before Christmas. Its aim is to devolve power from Whitehall to local areas via a combined authority and a directly elected mayor. It's not per se about individual councils in the area surrendering power, but it's about an area taking control over budgets, over strategies, to ensure that the right decisions are taken at the right level and reflect the needs and desires of that community in a way that is better than someone elsewhere in Westminster thinking about what they feel is right for Greater Essex. The approach the government is taking this time is slightly different to devolution in the past, where previously it had been on a basis of coming together with government and reaching a deal. So there'll be a negotiation of what's on the table, what's off the table, and how much money we are taking, you may well be granted. The government's clear in the white paper that it's going to set up a framework whereby if you go for a particular model, there are certain powers that will be devolved, certain funding pots that come down to the local area. The constituent members of a combined authority that will work with a mayor are the upper tier authorities, and that's Essex County Council, Thurrock Council and Southend. And we will work together to create that combined authority that will work with the mayor to make sure that it functions properly. Now, those three upper tier authorities came together at the beginning of this year and wrote to government and said, we're in. We can see the benefits of devolution. We can see how it can drive growth and prosperity for Greater Essex, and therefore we think that's a great opportunity for us, and we want to be on your ambitious priority programme. That programme is going to be moving at pace, and if all goes well, we will have a combined authority and a directly elected mayor in 2026. But that's subject to a consultation, and that was a government-led consultation that closed 2 weeks ago, where they asked the community across Greater Essex whether they thought this was the right thing or not. And at the moment, the government is analysing the responses to that, and we should hear, I think the phrase is in due course. I'm not quite sure when that will be, but hopefully by June, and we'll know whether the government wants to proceed or not with a mayoral model. We, however, know that there are benefits to doing this, and we don't want to wait for that decision. So internally within Thurrock, and working with our partners at both Essex County Council and Southend, we are putting together a programme to work through a number of different issues to ensure that we are ready for day one, so that there is a functioning combined authority and we can get on with taking the decisions that benefit Greater Essex. It's an opportunity for those three councils to really come together and think about what works for Greater Essex around transport, local infrastructure, skills, housing, the environment, climate change, all those big issues that we as one borough can't just deal with with ourselves, but in partnership with others we can. We've set up a work programme that is taking this forward under 4 headings. One is the operating model of the combined authority. One is sorting out the financial functions of the combined authority. The third is around the legal and governance. And then the fourth is the policy. The direction of this work is that we want to go for the de minimis for day one, but then expand it once it's in operation. And we're taking learning from other combined authorities who are already ahead of us, that have been in existence for a number of years, to learn from them what's the most effective way of establishing this organisation. So it's got a sound foundation for the long term. That work is being overseen by a steering group, which is made up of the leaders and chief execs, plus programme sponsors from the 3 authorities. And that strategic steering group sets the direction for us that we go off and then deliver. So it's a fairly substantial programme, moving at pace, ready for May 2026, when we and Southend and Essex County will play our part in supporting a combined authority and a mayor. Local government reorganisation is a slightly different beast. It's not about taking power from Whitehall to us to make decisions. This is about how local government is structured in Essex. And this again was spurred on by the government, who set a clear ambition that it wants to end 2-tier local government in England. That's the county and the district model. In doing so, and in proposing that there are reforms or inviting those 2-tier areas to come forward with ideas, it also expanded that remit to include smaller unitary authorities that neighbour 2-tier areas that have financial difficulties or in the long term may well have issues around sustainability. I think it's fair to say we are definitely as Thurrock in that category, and therefore when the invitation was issued it came to Thurrock Council as well. Now the purpose behind this is to think about how you can restructure local government so that it is more efficient, so that we have new unitary councils across Essex. We here in Thurrock understand the benefits of being in a unitary authority. We know that residents in Thurrock, if they have a number of issues they need to deal with, whether it be housing, whether it be social care support for people in their family, they can go to Thurrock Council, one council. If you live in a 2-tier area, you've got to talk to your borough on your housing, you've got to talk to your county around social care, and it comes very, very complex. So there are great efficiencies and improvements in terms of what this means for our residents being a unitary. But how we create that in Essex is very, very challenging, because there are a number of different things that we need to consider. There is, the hard facts of how you deal with let's just say it, debt, finances, making sure we have sustainable councils. And it's also a heart, it's not as well as the mind, it's the heart as well. It's what we think about our community, where we live, who represents us, and where do we feel, what's our sense of belonging. So it's a very emotive issue when you talk about local government reorganisation. So on the 21st of March, we as Greater Essex, all of the councils in Greater Essex, the county, the districts and the 2 unitaries, submitted a proposal, very initial proposal to government to say we can see the advantages of local government reorganisation and we want to be part of that programme. At that time there was an expression of interest from certain people around the answer might be 5. And other people that were involved said, well, we want to see the evidence. And that's what we're working on at the moment. So there is a programme in place across all of those authorities where we are trying to generate the right data, the right evidence that can really allow us to look at these issues and think what is the right solution for Thurrock, but also for the other areas within Essex. Because whatever we do, whatever we think is right for us, will always have a knock-on effect to our neighbours across the entire county. So we have a programme within the council that is looking at financial sustainability, looking at culture, and it's all being coordinated centrally between all of these 15 boroughs, well, not just boroughs, sorry, all of these 15 councils, so that we can start to think about what is right. The end goal, if the government agrees, is to have new unitary councils in Essex, across Essex, or indeed across England, by 2028. But the first real step is to develop a business case that we need to submit to government by September. And that is the moment where you have to say, we think this is the right model for Essex moving forward. So we are doing that analytical work as officers. We know that we have a working group and we need to engage with our community, so we have the working group with members. We're here talking about it today, and there needs to be further engagement because this affects us all and it's about the future of everyone that lives in Greater Essex. But the first step at the moment is to make sure that we have a consistent and sound understanding of the data, because no one benefits from an argument over numbers. There are going to be arguments over how you interpret that and what you think is the answer. But we're establishing that baseline understanding now around the data, and in the fullness of time, we will develop a business case by September. So they are the 2 significant programmes that we're here to talk about today. Devolution, which is about taking things from government so we have more control, and then local government reorganisation, which is about changing the structure of local government in Essex. And it'd be really great to hear the views of this committee as to how we shape this going forwards. And any other questions, obviously, you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And just to pick up on something that you said, a point I think that needs to be re-emphasised. I'm sure members here know this already, but I think it's important to really place on record that there's actually 2 things we're looking at here and 2 things we're talking about. Devolution is one thing, local government reorganisation is another. They don't necessarily go hand in hand. You can have one without the other. And I think it's important that obviously we don't confuse it as one process and one being dependent on the other. It makes sense to look at them together, and of course they tie in together. But you know, you could have a view on local government reorganisation, a completely different view on devolution. So they're not one and the same thing. And I think that's something, obviously, as we, in our communications, we need to really, really stress that. For the purposes of tonight, I mean, I did wonder whether we should have part of the meeting about to focus on devolution, part to focus on local government reorganisation. But to be honest, I prefer a relaxed approach. I don't care whether we flip between the 2, if that works for you. So if people have a question on devolution and then later they want to go back to local government reorganisation, I think we can do that. There's no problem with that. So obviously I've got lots of questions, but I'll throw it out to members for any comments, any questions. Okay, I think Councillor Fletcher was first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. You won't be surprised, I've got a couple of questions on comms. What has been done so far to engage residents, and how do you know it's worked? If we could start with that one.
So The most significant area of engagement has been on local government, has been on devolution, so the creation of a mayor. Now, the government has decided to lead on all engagement and consultation on the devolution programme for every area which is pursuing a mayoral model. So it's been central government who has led this process. They have led the communications across Greater Essex. They have hosted webinars. They have physically turned up to meetings. They've ventured out of SW1 and come to Chelmsford. I think they've been to Tilbury as well, to the Tilbury Forum, to engage residents, to understand what their views are, as well as an online campaign and an ability to respond to the consultation online as well. I understand, I have a regular update with the department that's leading this, and I understand that the response rate for Greater Essex has been quite significant in comparison to other devolution areas, and they are analysing those responses at the moment. They've had a mix of responses from individuals, from residents, from obviously institutions. We responded to the consultation, as did every other local authority in Essex, and organisations, the voluntary community sector, have also responded, business organisations. So there's been quite significant engagement with different parts of the community. It's always hard to reach everyone on the streets with this particular issue, but we have done our best as Thurrock to amplify that as much as we can, and as we go through this process, because even once we have a mayor, if it's green lit and we have a combined authority, you've then got to think about the projects that we fund, what we take forward. So we certainly do see that engagement is an ongoing thing over the course of a number of years. Local government reorganisation is slightly different. We're at a very early stage with that. It runs at a slightly different timetable. You know, the expression of interest we've put into government now was a decision taken by, and rightly so, the executive. But as we develop proposals there, we need to engage further, because part of a sound business case is about understanding what your community wants and what they think about it. And we are currently thinking about how effectively we can engage neighbourhoods within Thurrock and beyond as well with neighbouring councils.
Thanks for that. And it's good to hear that government feels it's getting a reasonable amount back. It might be me, and it might be the fact that Blackshots doesn't have a forum, but I'm sort of not aware of any reaching out, if you like, beyond obviously the fact that it is on the Thurrock Council site. But of course, you've got to know it's there, and you know that's a sort of a pull rather than a push comms. But yeah, certainly if government is coming back and saying we've had quite a high level of engagement, both positive and critical, then yeah, okay, that sounds okay. As far as the LGR, yes, I'm aware that we're at an early stage, but I'm also aware that a lot has been made on local forums of the one aspect, which is obviously the decision to postpone elections. And what strikes me is that we've not really made a particularly convincing or particularly clear case yet as a council as to, you know, all they can see is the elections they're not getting. What they can't see is, well, okay, what's happening in its stead? Why, you know, what is it that we're doing that has made it a sensible idea to postpone these elections? I don't think, to be quite honest, we want our elections back party is necessarily gaining a great deal of traction, which is not surprising when you look at the percentage that actually voted last year. But it is evidence of a vacuum, I think. And I know we're early, but I also know that we have a tendency to wait until a thing is very much done and dusted, or at least in great looking shape, before we'll communicate about it. And sometimes I think we miss a trick by not communicating earlier about what we're doing to create that finished product.
Well, thank you. I certainly do take on board that feedback, and I think you're right. On local government reorganisation, there's a significant opportunity for us, and I do want to start engagement. You have to understand, you have to know exactly where you're starting from, and we're not quite there, but once we do, I think there is a very strong story for Thurrock to tell about local government reorganisation and how it benefits the residents of Thurrock We're a council in intervention. It provides an opportunity to look to the future and think of a more sustainable foundation for the community that we serve and to get out of the position that we're currently in. So it is a hell of a lot more that we've really got to tell that story rather than it just being the dry administrative process that someone like me might like as an officer. But actually there is something there that is more engaging about what we need to do for this community and what it means for them, because it can be quite compelling, and we need that input as well to think about what we think is right. It goes back to what I said earlier about it's a sense of place and community and how we work with those communities going forward and how we ensure that we continue to have that link and that ongoing dialogue for whatever comes be after Thurrock Council as well.
So I guess what's to stop a similar conversation from the one we're having now from happening with residents? What has to be in place for yourself or for council officers to have a similar open, positive discussion with residents about what's coming down the line?
I think we need to understand what the full implications are of the financial position that we're in, and a broader understanding of what that future may well look like. Because there is no point going to talk to a community and say, well, actually, it could be one of a number of different options and we don't quite know yet. Because then you're not actually given a choice. You're not actually proposing something. You're not giving them something to engage with. You're presenting a relatively confused scenario. So I think we need to understand a little bit more, as do all of our neighbours, about what that landscape and what the evidence is pointing towards. And then it's about working with our members, everyone in this council as representatives of their wards, making sure that you're all armed to go and talk to your communities as well as us as the institution, engaging with the community and our partners. Because, you know, we commission services from different organisations, businesses, the third sector. We've got to think about how it impacts them and what they think of this as well moving forwards, because we've got to build something which is credible and works and takes into consideration their different views as well. So once we have an idea of what we think that picture is as it's emerging, we will engage with all tiers of our community.
Thanks. And to be honest, I think you've answered my next question, because I was going to ask about how you plan to engage members in engaging residents. But yeah, that sounds great. I mean, all I would say, all I would repeat though, is that let's not wait until it's to full time. And fine, you know, if there are too many variables to have a coherent story, great. But as soon as we've got a clear picture of the journey we're on, let's start taking them on the journey.
Thanks, Councillor Fletcher. Just pick up on that point, because obviously it's, I think, how we engage with communities as residents moving forward it's going to be at the forefront of all of our minds, I think. My experience of most things, even things that you think are going to excite the public, they take a while to land. I mean, even all the noise that's going on at the moment, I still think the majority of people in Thurrock don't know what devolution is and don't know what local government reorganisation is, but they will do in the fullness of time. Those who are interested in local politics and how services are delivered, I do think it's something that will gain traction. And I think Councillor Fletcher makes a very valid point, is that it's better to not be responding to that, but to be, even if you think no one's listening at the start, to basically, you know, make sure that our message is in free flow. And I'm just concerned that perhaps the council isn't in the best position in that regard. It says at page 17 that part of our strategy was to encourage people to attend a meeting in Chelmsford in late March. It's right to have done that, but, you know, encouraging people in Thurrock to travel to Chelmsford, I think really, with the best will in the world, you're going to get very limited numbers of people travelling outside of Thurrock to those kind of meetings. And then you said that because of the fairly tight timescales, the council is looking, in terms of public engagement, actually going out into the communities, you're looking at tagging on to already planned events. September will be here before we know it, but it's not like it's round the corner. Why can't we arrange over the summer some engagement events solely on this out in the community? I don't want to in any way sound disparaging, but I can't imagine there are large numbers of Thurrock residents who go to big lunches, and I just think that we could be doing more to actually get out into the community and explain. you can seek views, but the first thing we need to is explain it to people. And I think we can be doing a lot more to explain what this actually means and what these terminologies actually mean before people can form a view on it. So there's a bit long-winded way of saying, why can't we do more in terms of actually organising some specific events over the summer where we take this to residents rather than tacking on to things which might not be the best vehicle for getting this message out.
So I agree with you, but I think you can do both. So I do think it is about tagging things onto certain events, because actually you can engage residents in a different setting and they will be more open. If I stand there on a stall and say, come talk to me about local government reorganisation, I'm not going to get many people possibly come and see me. If I go to a mother and toddlers group and they just talk to you about services that you're currently receiving and how do you think they should change and what do you think of your community, then you get that level of engagement. So I think it's a multifaceted approach that we need to engage with communities. I agree let's do something over the summer. I think that's right. We can and we will do more. I heed your point about going to Chelmsford. It was a government-run consultation. That's all I will say. I also live in Essex and I did not go to Chelmsford for that event either. But I certainly did join in an online forum. It's not for me to comment any further on the government approach, but fundamentally I think you're right. It's a multifaceted approach to reach parts of our community, because I do want to know what people think. We all do. But you have to just be, tactical about how you do that to understand what people think, that's all, and we will do that. And can I also just say, you're right about it's a long burn. It's not just September. We need to understand what's going on before September, but actually it's a long running to the vesting date of a new authority. So it's going to be different types of engagement with different parts of the community once we move in from an initial stage that we're in now about developing a business case all the way through to thinking about implementation, because there'll be moments we want to talk to people about how this will run, how you access services, how you bid for contracts, many different ways. So we are very mindful of that over the course of the next few years.
Thank you. I'll just bring Councillor Kent in before we move to the other members of the committee who have indicated.
I'll be very, very brief. I think the idea of piggybacking on events that are already organised is a really good one. You don't have to go and create an event. You can turn up at things like big lunches, and there are a variety of things, be they school fetes, whatever, that kind of gets the message out there. You've got a captive audience, so I think that's good. On the one consultation event in Chelmsford, I think that actually makes the case really strongly for why we need devolution. Somebody in Whitehall says, we're going to devolve power to these various numbers of areas, and we're going to consult on it, and then they look and realise they've got no machinery whatsoever with which to consult. 15 years ago, there were local government offices of the regions that may have been able to set something up. Now there is no machinery on the ground whatsoever. So all they can do in each area is to have one event in the county town. I just think that makes the case for why we need devolution really strongly.
Thank you. Okay, so several hands went up. I've missed even more going up. So I had Councillor Kerry next, and then Councillor Kent.
So, firstly, I'm a big supporter of the idea of mayors for regions, and have been ever since, you see what's happened with Greater Manchester and West Midlands and Merseyside with those strong mayors. And equally, I'm in favour of having stronger unitary authorities and getting rid of, like you said, that I go to this council for the bins, I go to that council for the roads, that sort of thing. However, I think they both run in tandem, I think, the idea of the combined mayor and the authorities. And I'll give you the reason why. I've mentioned the mayors of Manchester and Merseyside and all that. And I read the book Head North, which was jointly written by Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham. And they described their first day in the job. They had a desk and a laptop, and that's about it. However, that wasn't all they had, because Steve Rotherham had Wirral Council and Sefton Council and Liverpool City Council, and Andy Burnham still had Trafford and Tameside and Bury to work with, and Andy Street had Coventry, Dudley, etc. When the new elected Mayor of Essex comes into power, what will they have to work with? Because the delivery unit is actually beneath the strategic mayor, and the strategic mayor brings together the leaders of local authorities. So eventually we'll get there in the sense of having strong unitaries that represent a larger proportion of the population. But when the new Essex mayor turns up in their office and they've got the laptop and they look around for what's beneath them or around them, there's not really going to be anything there. And it's going to be a long, long time before we see what I think there's going to be great benefits to this long term, but it's going to be a long time to get there. So let's have some comment on what I've said about the journey of the new unitary authorities within Greater Essex and how that could impact the effectiveness of the new mayor whenever they are elected.
So I think one of the things that Pan Essex we have to do is to establish some of the machinery of the elected mayoralty that makes that mayoral combined authority work from day one, without putting things in place that tie the hands of whoever becomes the mayor. So one of the things we will look to do is to establish a small core team. There is some government funding to help with that will be there on a temporary basis, not full time, to allow the mayor to establish their own staff. One of the things that we're trying to tease out between Essex, Southend and ourselves is an appointment process for that, which means that you don't just say, we'll have one good officer from Southend, one good officer from Essex, etc., etc. But the one power that the mayor has is kind of soft power. It's the convening power that mayors have. And that doesn't only kind of go across local authorities. That goes across business. It goes across the third sector. It goes it goes deep into communities. And that's why people like Steve Rotherham, Andy Burnham, Andy Street have been successful, because they've been able to use that convening power. And that's, I think, what we're looking for.
Thanks for that, Councillor Ken. I think because for this to work, it has, like you said, the convening power is there, and it needs to have status attached to it to draw together, like you said, business leaders and other council leaders and everything like that. Because on page 41, obviously, it says about we face big challenges, pockets of deprivation that frustrate people's life chances, and totally true. And I do think that having a centralised system will allow for more sort of strategy, and that's why I just sort of worry that without the local authorities underneath that deal with the nuts and bolts of housing and things like that are really part of deprivation, it could hold it back. But do you think, Councillor, that the sheer convening power of the mayor alone will sort of compensate for the fact that initially there won't be these new authorities in place, and when they are created, they'll be quite nascent, quite early into the new mayor's term of office? And do you think the convening power, which I totally agree with that you said, will sort of will compensate for the fact there'll be fledgling new authorities hatching into life?
I think it's all of us across Essex that are creating the new authorities have to be very clear what it is they want those authorities to achieve. And certainly in Thurrock, we're already thinking about how we would organise services in a different way if we were working with our neighbours. So if we end up with 3, 4, 5, 6 new authorities across Essex, from day one, we've got to be working out how those authorities will come together, because actually commissioning on that scale, commissioning for 1.9 million people, obviously brings kind of advantages that commissioning for 190,000 doesn't. I just think we need to be very clear what it is that we want to achieve here in Thurrock. We want to be very clear that we want to get the best benefits that we possibly can from things like the Freeport, and how we anchor some of the achievements of the Freeport, some of the money that it will bring in, some of the opportunities, and make sure they're anchored here to Thurrock. But we have to be very clear how a mayor will help us to deliver that. And of course, the mayor will have a plan for the whole of the county of Essex. So, you know, I always come back to places like Jaywick in Tendring, which is still one of the most deprived places in the country. And if a new mayor for Essex hasn't improved life in Jaywick in 10 years, then in my view, they would have failed. So they need to have a very clear plan from day one. And we can't get kind of hung up on the niceties of local government boundaries and local government structures. We've got to be able to cut through that, just have a very clear plan, very clear priorities, and get together on delivering them.
Just one more point, which isn't actually a question. It's just, I think, you know, you've mentioned Jaywick there, and I think it kind of emphasises the sort of fragmented nature of our infrastructure in Essex, especially in terms of sort of transport. And as we all know, if transport opportunities are not there, then job opportunities are not there, and schools struggle for the best teachers because they can't get to them and things like that. So, just as I said, it wasn't going to be a question, but I suppose it is. Do you sort of see the mayor being able to revitalise transport infrastructure without needing to rely on the new local authorities to be able to sort of aid with that?
Yeah, so one of the powers that is devolved down is over transport, over public transport, and you know, you just got to look in Thurrock. In Thurrock, we still have more job vacancies than we have people unemployed. And if you take somewhere like DP World down in Corringham, unless you drive, you can't get there. Can't get there by public transport, not easily anyway. If you take the north of the county, you look at Stansted Airport. Always looking for workers because they can't get workers. You can't get to Stansted Airport to go to work if you live in a place like Thurrock unless you drive. And for many people, that's a real barrier. But the other advantage that an elected mayor would have is looking at that whole adult skills agenda. And too often when we look at adult skills, we think about qualifications. But it's about much more than that. It's about some of those soft skills. So we know that if somebody's out of work for 2 years, the chances are they'll never work again. We need to be working with those people, instilling some of those soft skills, some of that confidence, working with low-level mental health issues to get people into a position where they're ready to go into the job market and they're ready to access jobs. And I tell you what, you can do that much better if you have all of those levers at your hands locally than somebody trying to dictate it from Whitehall.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cathy Kent.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask about, obviously it's a very ambitious timetable, how confident we are with all the work that's to be done and the consultations and having lots of different areas like Essex and Southend and they're all together to get their views, that we as Greater Essex as a whole will be able to deliver on the timescale that the government has set in place.
It's a very good question. So, on local government, on devolution, it is a phenomenally ambitious timetable to reach May 26th for a mayoral election and to have a shadow combined authority established well before that. It's challenging not only because we need to put things together across the three upper tier authorities, but we're also dependent on the speed at which government moves with their decision making, with preparing a statutory instrument, laying it in Parliament, making the thing legally real. So there are a number of different interdependencies there. I'm confident in that. I think we understand what those interdependencies are. We have a plan, we know what we need to do, and we're not being we're being measured about what we need for day one. So it is indeed, you know, the laptop, the building, but also that sense, because it's actually about the culture of an organisation that you're creating so that a mayor can then shape and then develop their own approach to things. So we're very realistic, we're learning from others. So although it's a difficult challenge, I think we are with the programme that we have with our partners in a good position. It's not without risk, but in a good position to deliver. Local government reorganisation is slightly different. The timetable for a business case for September is again ambitious, and the government usually sets the more demanding timetable on us, and is slightly more flexible when it comes to allowing them time to take a decision. And I hope they've heard that. But after September, once we've got a plan, we have a good amount of time to then start thinking about how we create these new unitaries, whether it be 2, 3, 4, 5. And there is a degree of cooperation, certainly at officer level, on that side of developing a business case, that we know that whatever the outcome is, we know the right thing to do is to create new institutions. And our political leaders have been very clear to us about, once a decision is taken, we come together, we start building those new authorities and thinking of what is the best way of doing this. Again, I can't comment on how prepared we are for that. We're doing the right things, but once we're reach September, we've got to have a very clear programme to deliver those new institutions. So that is, I'll admit, that is risky. That is risky, and we need to be on top of that.
Thank you. Councillor Abbas?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I know it's very difficult kind of like discussion what we're having, because we are at very initial stages. But we know this, like, the current system is not working, the local government or the unitary authority. That's why we are moving into this devolution and restructuring. So on Councillor Cathy Kent's point, so obviously this is very, very ambitious timetable. And in terms of consultations, because I know when we had this new ward boundaries for Purfleet and Thames, so but still the process took longer than this consultation process, So obviously this is very easy to say, like, that this is a national government-led consultation process. But we all know from my personal experience, I don't think so we will see a huge number of people who have given their views, and considering this just one in-person, and that's again in Chelmsford. So how confident we are, the system we are going into, that would work for us?
So I think we are designing a new system, and we're designing a new system at pace. So if you take whatever new authority we end up with, you'll be looking at integrating the best of Essex County Council with their adult social care, with their children's social care, and the best of what we do here in Thurrock to create something new. And I look back to Thurrock becoming a unitary authority. And what we were doing then, we're taking powers from Essex County Council and putting them into an existing authority. And our mantra then was that we wanted minimum change for residents on day one with maximum capacity for change thereafter, because we didn't want anything to go wrong. We wanted every child that was looked after on the last day of April to be looked after on the first day of May. For every vulnerable adult to still have the same care and the same level of care. And that's really, really important. But you know what? It was a mistake, because what we ended up doing was replicating what was already there, and not taking the opportunity to design something that was absolutely new and fundamentally different, so that we can deliver services better to residents. And I think that's the challenge that we've got, is working with partners to do something that is new. It makes, you've got to be safe, you've got to be compliant, but you've got to be delivering in a better way for those people we seek to serve. And I'll just give one example that people won't think of. I don't want to open up kind of raw wounds, but this authority was badly let down by its leadership, both politically and managerially. And we're all still really angry that people haven't been held to account for that. We have the opportunity in creating something new that ties accountability in from day one. And I think we would be really, really amiss if we didn't take that opportunity. So we've got to start working on that now. And the timetable is ambitious. And, you know, inevitably that means that there's not going to be a boundary review to work out how many councillors there are initially. We're going to have to, between us, take a stab looking at existing ward boundaries to come up with a new council body of somewhere between 60 and 90 people. And then in due course, there will be boundary reviews over the course of a decade to sort out, a better thought out and a better rationale for what we have. But you know what? We have no alternative. We've got to make this work. Because if we don't, then the government will come and impose it on us. And whatever they impose on us will be less good than something we design ourselves.
Did you want to come back on that, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kent. You know, obviously you have seen this transformation, you know, at initial stages from Essex to Thurrock, and now obviously from Thurrock to Essex or to some other authority. So obviously, you know, we have a lot of obviously financial issues, but at the same time, we also have very positive things like, you know, we have ports, we have free port, you know, we have so many other things. So how best we can kind of protect financially our residents, you know. Obviously, we are also very mindful we have financial issues. So how this would be in a way adjusted?
So, you know, I think we all glibly say we know we have financial issues, but I think it's worth rehearsing those financial issues. We have a debt of around £900 million and rising. To set a budget, as we did a couple of months ago, we had to borrow, what was it, £72 million. That's £64 million to pay the debt interest on last year's debt and £8 million to help us to deliver a basic standard of public services. That's not financial trouble. That is an absolute disaster. And we have to use the opportunity of becoming part of something that is stronger, something that's more resilient, something that could be more ambitious for the benefit of our residents. And we're not the only authority that has kind of financial difficulties. We believe the combined debt of councils across Essex is somewhere in the region of £5.5 billion. And we believe there are councils in Essex. We spend, 34% of our revenue budget on debt, or the equivalent of it. We believe that there are councils in Essex that are spending, on a like-for-like basis, more than that. So it's not just us. And I think inevitably, to make this work, government is going to have to find a way of writing off, not all the debt, because that's not going to happen, but a portion of that debt, perhaps the kind of toxic element of that debt. And that's the argument that we've been making, and the argument that we continue to make.
Just one more.
Yeah, one more.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Kent, you know, for your answer. Just quickly, you know, Alex, you did mention, obviously, we need to see whether this is the right solution for Thurrock, because it will affect all of us. But obviously, we have obviously, you know, heard from you, the consultation process is led by the government, you know, so we can't really have any say on this or in terms of wider engagement, you know. But obviously, again, I was just reading this at 34, page 21. The members will be engaged at every step in the process. And when we know all these things, how it will affect us, this is a major decision, you know, moving forward. But we never had not a single full council meeting discussing this. So how will you engage with members, or what input will they have?
So the government-led consultation is on devolution. On local government reorganisation, we can engage and consult with our community. An engagement with members and the community is over that 3-4 year period to establish this. So when we submitted the expression of interest back in at March, we had a session where any member could come. You know, we had a discussion of General Purposes Committee. We then had a meeting of Cabinet. We have this session today. You're obviously starting a new municipal year where you can think about the programme that you want to put together in terms of full council meetings. I would expect an opportunity. I would have thought there would have been a moment there where you'd have a full council debate on this. In addition, we have a working group, a cross-party working group that has already meets again week after next, I think, isn't it? Where we are talking about the details of the evidence base that we're developing. Actually, I want to talk at the next meeting about a sense of community and a sense of place and how we start translating that. So there are a number of different ways that members can engage on this, either via full council, via a working group, and indeed I'm always very happy to talk to any member of the council if they want more information or want to share their views with me. So plenty of opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick one, sorry. Just the
Okay.
last one, sorry.
I've got quite a few members. still waiting,
Just
so
a quick, I'll
just
be very brief. Because in the last meeting, we had a deputy leader, So what I perceived from her conversation was she want less and less full council meetings, but she repeatedly mentioned 49 councillors, 49 councillors. So I'm just slightly concerned. I don't want just cabinet to, obviously this is something beyond our political, point scoring, but I personally think, we should put this agenda not just once, again and again to the full council meeting, rather than thinking we 5 or 6 individuals can make decisions on behalf of all these 49 councillors, when we know all those 49 councillors, they are equally elected by the people of Thurrock, who hasn't been consulted in, or they should have been personally, what I think. So I think that decisions should be made by 49 councillors rather than just a cabinet or selected councillors.
So the legislation is clear that it's an executive decision, so it is a decision that has to be made either by cabinet or by the leader of the council on their own. So what you will see is that there are some councils in Essex that have had council meetings. So they say they've had council meetings, they've discussed it, and then the leader has taken a decision subsequently. So we just need to be careful about that. But I think Alex has set it out really clearly. When we decided to apply for the priority programme, we held a meeting of the General Services Committee, which was chaired by Councillor Coxshall, that made the recommendation to Cabinet that we should proceed. When we put the bid in, we did so following a cabinet meeting where every councillor was invited, lots came along and lots had their say. To do some of the detailed work, we've established the cross-party working group, which is meeting and is looking at things in detail. And we're here tonight where you have an opportunity to look at this stuff in more detail than you'd be able to do in a council meeting with a kind of half an hour, 40 minutes that you'd be able to devote to it there. And I think what we've already said is that when we come to submitting the final business plan, that final bid in September, that it will be debated at a council meeting, and the council meeting will inform the decision of the executive. So I don't think there's any way that we want to exclude members from this. If this is going to be successful, and if the new authority is going to be successful, then it's really important that we take everybody with us, and that's the intention.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Rigby next, and then Councillor Green. No? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Alluding a bit to what Councillor Kent referenced earlier, particularly around children's services and adult social care, there's already quite a lot of change afoot with the ICB and NHS England being abolished, and there's already tricky transitions from preparing for adulthood, from children being transferred to adult services, and quite often there are gaps there and slip-ups as it is. What sort of processes will be put in place with this managing change so that there aren't disruptions? Will there be an actual department specialising in managing change, or will it be solely overseen by officers in those two areas?
It will partly be shaped by whichever the new authorities are that come into being. But you do highlight the concern. I mean, those services are always in change, whether you're going through local government reorganisation or not. And the best way, because we aren't the only council that, area that's ever restructured, it's happened in many areas elsewhere, and making sure that there is that continuity and that people are safe and well served is usually ensured by separating. You have the day-to-day management now of a service, and you have a separate team that oversees the integration into a new team. Because I think it's at the forefront of anyone's mind, particularly, you know, the politicians in the new organisation and the new statutory officers, that you continue to deliver good quality services and you protect and keep people safe who are the most vulnerable in the community. And the best way of doing that is to make sure you have a properly resourced transition team that oversees that movement from the current service to the new one. We're fortunate in Essex that with our social care services across all three upper tier authorities, they're good to outstanding services, they work well, there is a degree of cooperation and professional links there anyway, which gives us a little bit of an advantage when you think about moving to new structures. But it is a risk that we're aware of, and we will put the resource and the time in to make sure it's managed effectively.
Thank you, that's great. And just one further question, if that's okay. You've alluded to a few times about evidence-led decisions and analysing data. How exactly is that being done? Is there a specific process in place you're doing, or is it being changed depending on different areas of the...
We have, across Greater Essex, a series of working groups that's made up of officers from all of the districts, the county, Southend and Thurrock, based by particular groups around particular subjects where we know we need to gather the evidence and the data to see what it's telling us. So there's a finance group, for example. There's a group that's looking at the governance and the legality around this. There's a group that's looking at travel to work zones and the economic drivers. So we're pulling this together to see what the picture is. So it's a properly resourced cross-authority series of working groups to look at the data and then to model what the future may well look like. And the most obvious and the big issue is you have a county council where about 70%, if not more, of its expenditure is on social care across a geography of 1.5 million people. So the disaggregation of that spend and where that demand is quite an important large task, because the driver here is about creating new sustainable councils. So you don't want to make sure that anyone is unbalanced or destabilised as a result of that. So these working groups are there to gather this data, and we are probably going to bring in somebody external to validate this as well and to really check the work that we've done to make sure it's a sound basis, so that whichever direction any authority then wants to take about what they think is the right answer, it's based on a sound evidence base underpinning it.
Thank you. So there are some sort of specialist oversight on the sort of decisions on the data that will come in and check that it's all in place.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So this isn't being done by I would say facetiously a small team within the corporate centre. You know, we are involving the DCSs to gather the data. You know, senior officers on this side and other councils are there to make sure it's the right information, the right weighting is being put against certain things. And as I say, we're getting people external to come and look at it to do some of the work for us as well, to make sure it's accurate and correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. First of all, thank you, Alex and Councillor Kent, for your presentation. This is exciting times. There's no two ways about it. And I must admit, I've always been in favour of unitary councils. I think that you can cut out the layers. It's got to be better. And so I'm a good advert for that when I talk to residents. But getting back to residents, I echo what Councillor Fletcher said. And I'm fortunate, as chair of the forum, I have Councillor Holloway come along, who puts a very good presentation and updates us on what's happening as far as we know with devolution. And I think he'll probably support me by saying that everyone's very engaged with that. They enjoy I think that council have got to really think outside the box as to engage with residents. As Councillor Kent said earlier, years ago, and Councillor Kent and I will remember that we used to have, apart from the Gazette, we had the Yellow Advertiser, we had many, many papers in which you could put articles in there that would have kept the residents updated. That, sadly, is not the case. I don't think big lunches would be the way forward, because that is a family day out, realistically. It's not the, should we say, the arena has to do that. But we need to work out a way as to keep, because at the moment, residents do feel out in the dark. There's no elections. We know boundary changes, devolution. There's lots of talk going on out there. What's going on? So we really do need to do that. My other point was debt. We mentioned, obviously, we've got colossal debt. Who wants us is one of the things that's been said. But I like to sell us. I think we're in a good, in one respect, we're in a good position. We are free international ports. We bring in a large proportion of business rates, and I'm led to believe that we're going to be keeping, as part of unitary councils, we're going to be keeping a large proportion of that. So I think that we're in a very strong position. All councils have got debt. I know it isn't as bad as what we've got. It's extraordinary what we've got. But, you know, what I'm saying is that I think we're a good sell. So we shouldn't sell ourselves short. So, you know, there you go. Sell us. Thank you.
That's absolutely right, and that's actually what this is about. And if you look at the devolution aspect of it, I believe that we will deliver for residents of Thurrock better under a combined authority, with a mayor that has the power to convene, a mayor that can be seen on not only the national stage but the international stage, driving investment into places like DP World, the Port of Tilbury, like Purfleet. We have that position on the edge of London, but not in London, and never will be. That kind of bridge to the rest of Greater Essex means that we have you know, incredible opportunity. And I just give the one example that I really like. If productivity across Essex were at the average of southeastern authorities, then the economy of Essex would be 18% larger. And that's a phenomenal figure. That means more jobs, more businesses, more business rates, and more money in people's pockets. And that's got to be worth having, and it's got to be worth fighting for. So yes, we will sell Thurrock for all it's worth and make sure that we retain as much as we can of the growth that will happen because of devolution. And for local government reorganisation, you know, I come back to it. Yes, Thurrock's debt is a problem. We know it's a problem. This is part of the solution to it, but we mustn't fall into the trap of thinking it's only Thurrock, because it isn't. The combined debt across local government in Essex is around £5.5 billion. It's not just Thurrock. And finally, Roy, if I can, you know, we talk about communication, and actually there are two aspects to it, aren't there? One is information, and the other is consultation. And I think those events like Big Lunches are a really good place to do that information. Not necessarily to do the consultation, but to get information out there, because you do have hundreds of people that are having fun, hopefully in the sun, that will be prepared to talk, to engage, to pick up leaflet, to take it home, and to reflect on it. So I don't say you consult there, but I do say you inform there.
You said you had a couple of questions, Councillor Jones. Is that it, or have you got...
I suppose the other one, realistically, was that the population. We talk about 500,000 as a unitary council. One said 360,000. So is this open? Do we know exactly the numbers, or we don't know that until we know how many unitaries there will be in Essex, and then we can work out the numbers? Is that the case so far?
So what government has said, and what the minister has said in the letter that invites application, is that they will look at populations of a minimum of 500,000. So that's what the letter says, that's what the guidance says, that's what the white paper says. What we do know is that there will be some flexibility for particular kind of geographical issues, or to make sure that you maintain a sense of place. So that means that at times you will be able to make a case for smaller authorities. What I think personally is unlikely is that that will translate into everywhere can have smaller authorities and for a greater number. What it might mean is that if you have a population of, I don't know, 2.3 million, then you can have 4 authorities at your 500,000. The one that's left over at 300,000 would be okay. I think it's more that. But I think the dilemma we have, and everyone who's doing this is kind of grappling with it, is that we want to keep local government as local as we possibly can, to keep that sense of place, to keep the connection between elected representatives and the people that they serve, whilst at the same time getting a scale and a mass that means that these new authorities are going to be sustainable in the long term. Because the worst thing that we can do is to create a huge phalanx of new authorities up and down the country that are serving Section 114 notices in 18 months. Nobody wants that, and we have to make sure that we don't fall into that trap.
Thank you. And Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on what Councillor Jones was saying, we have an excellent borough here in Thurrock. We've got all the resources that we need. Seeing what's put them there are potentially 3 to 5 unitary authorities, new ones. Have we as Thurrock got who we want as our preferred partners in that new unitary authority?
So I think your starting point is the geography. So, you know, our neighbours, those authorities that we border, clearly will be the ones that we end up with. And as kind of tempting as it is to say that means our preferred option is, I really do think that we should be guided by the evidence. And if the evidence suggests that we go east to Southend, then we go east to Southend. If the evidence suggests that we go north into Brentwood and Chelmsford, then we go north into Brentwood and Chelmsford. I think it would be a genuine mistake to predetermine where you think you're going to be. I think we should be open-minded and look at the evidence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. A few quick questions from me. I agree with Councillor Kent. I mean, I think it's certainly in terms of local government reorganisation, we've probably all got in our minds what is sensible and what isn't, but, you know, we've seen in sort of some not too distant district councils, people making very rash, ill-informed, immature statements that probably are more, their ideas are more self-serving than what's better for the residents that they serve. So I agree, we need to take an evidence-led approach. But I think you did touch on it, Alex. In fact, you more than touched on it. But I want to be very clear and understand what we think that evidence is, because I think certainly for this committee, in the new municipal year, whoever's on the committee, it's going to have a very important role in that public scrutiny and that, you know, being that critical friend. And it's not our job to sort of press the council on, you know, what's our option going to be. It's going to look at, I think, certainly in the early stage of the first part of the municipal year, to satisfy ourselves that the council is looking at the right information to make an informed decision. We need to have confidence that the council is going along the right route to make that informed decision. It's not, you know, we can't just sit here and wait for those preferred options to be announced, and, you know, it's not our job to necessarily influence that decision. It's to satisfy ourselves the council is looking at the right thing. So I think the first committee of the new municipal year, I think its role should be to look at the things that we think is the evidence we need. But for the here and now, can you you did, it was in response to Councillor Rigby's question, I think, you did go into it, but just so we're very clear, at this early stage, so the council can make an informed decision, what is it that we think we need to begin that process of arriving at a decision?
This has the potential of possibly being a phenomenally long answer in terms of data sets, and I'm more than happy to set out in writing what we as Greater Essex are looking at, and that we call it a data lake. Be very open about that in terms of what we're gathering and what, with our partners. But to give the committee a feel of, therefore, what do I think
Just
is...
sorry to interrupt. Fine. Well, I mean, of course, we have to make a decision that's in the interest of all of Greater Essex. I'm talking about local government reorganisation rather than devolution. But let's be clear, we need to be, our primary concern is what's best really for Thurrock and Thurrock residents. So by instantly answering that question and saying we're working with our, the fear is we could be led by bigger local authorities. I'm not saying we are, but our job is to satisfy ourselves that actually Thurrock is making a position which is that best suits our residents. So rather than what we're saying as part of Greater, what is it that Thurrock Council thinks it needs in terms of evidence to make the best decision for us?
Absolutely. And so there is a data lake of information there, and it is being poured, because for us to make the right decision for Thurrock, I need to know what the data says about Brentwood, about Basildon, about Castle Point, about the county. That's the point. I need to know not just what... I've got the control of my own data in Thurrock. I need to know what's happening elsewhere to really get under the bonnet to see what's happening within local government with our neighbours. So we have information, and we are gathering information on a whole number of different things around social deprivation, indicators of public health, net borrowing against revenue, proposed expenditure, the quality of assets behind borrowing, the disaggregation of services at the county level, where their placement of children are, what the projections of populations may well be, and how that impacts on shifts of migration, how that will shift and in business rate income. There's a whole myriad of data out there that if we understand what that picture is for Greater Essex, we can understand how you build a new council, of which Thurrock will be a part of it, that builds a sustainable future. Because I know what our issues are, as the leader has said, around our level of debt. I also know what our advantages are of being the corridor into London, a free port, great public services within this council, and it's about how you build out from that point. So we've got to make sure we have the right partners that puts us in a stronger position. So I will happily send you that list of that data. But for me, it's about finding sustainable partners with the right financial future that can really take on the services that we already deliver now to continue to deliver quality services for the public. Because without that, we are where we are. We're a council in trouble with a huge debt, with a massive year-on-year deficit that we are, at the moment, having to borrow money from the government to cover that debt. So the future now is bleak. So we've got to make sure that what we build resolves that for once and for all for the community of Thurrock.
Councillor Holloway.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, a recommendation on the back of tonight's meeting. I think that the briefing notes, the headlines on devolution and local government, pages 19 to 27 should be put out to all councillors as a briefing for them to take it forward when they are questioned. I want to make a thanks to Stephen and Sarah for making the white paper and the consultation document not bite-sized but readable, straightforward going on with, and that might be a handy document for all 49 councillors going forward as things develop, so they can answer evenly where we are at this point in time, get by all the jargon and know the devolution lines between the jargon, exactly what devolution is and what local government reform is, and those pages set it out very straightforwardly. So I think that should be the recommendation, that this goes out to councillors, but just to 49 councillors, and I would hold it there at them pages, because as you inferred, Alex, and you, John, the LGR programme is very, very ambitious, and we do not want to mislead our residents that this is going to be bang, 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 drop into place, because we're dealing with another 15 district councils, and there is a danger, even if we've got our house in order, that our partners and people we're aligned to might not.
and it could slip, and that would be unfair to tell our people that. But that's the recommendation I think we should take forward, Chair. I'll leave your good graces to whether you think that's got any traction or not.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be any objection to that from other members, so I'm more than happy if we can capture that as a recommendation, please. Thank you. So just, I'll sort of rattle through my questions as quickly as possible. So the government's white paper on LGR, one of the requirements is that the new structures create better community empowerment. Obviously, that's completely different to consultation. That's obviously something I would expect us to be thinking about now, what that new local authority will mean in terms of community empowerment. How are we preparing for that? What do we think could potentially come out or will come out of a new local authority in terms of empowerment?
So we've been doing some work in Chadwell for a scheme that we're calling Communities in Action, that looks at how we can do just that, how we can empower communities to take decisions for themselves and to have a greater say over what it is that they do. It's taken a long time to put this together, longer than we would have liked, but we're coming to the end of that as a pilot, and there'll be a recommendation coming through Cabinet, hopefully in June, which will give us the building block to roll that out across Thurrock. And I think that what will then happen is whoever we end up partnering with in a new authority will take that as a template for that whole authority. It's absolutely essential that if we're going to end up in something that's larger, that we somehow find a way of keeping it hyper-local as well. And we believe that if it's successful, Communities in Action will be the way to do that.
Thank you. And just page 14, the third bullet point under 4.3 mentions that an external dedicated program director has been appointed. Just for clarity, can you just confirm who or what is that external program director? Is there any cost involved in that for Thurrock Council?
No. It's somebody who currently works at Essex County Council, who has been appointed to act as the programme director for the 3 upper tier authorities on devolution.
So it's not.
To clarify, if I may, she was external. She was doing work with Essex, which is how we knew of her, and she was appointed to this role. So it wasn't just a shift and lift from someone, sorry, in Essex. She was working there before, and she's now moved into this role. We are looking at how we then start, because at the moment we're doing it in terms of financing this work, each authority is picking up some of the slack at the moment, and as we move towards setting up the shadow combined authority, we are going to pool our money and resources in order to make sure that there is a pool of funds that we can all draw upon to make sure it's a success, as well as using the money that comes down from central government in order to make sure that there is the right institution in place from day one.
Thank you. A last question from me. We can't escape the fact that, I'm going back to devolution now. Well, both actually. If we have an elected mayor, we move towards an elected mayor, it's very likely there'll be a mayoral precept. It's very likely that there'll have to be harmonisation of council tax bandings. That's almost certainly going to mean that, Thurrock has to catch up with other local authorities. There's not going to be a council tax cut. There is a real cost to this, isn't there, for residents potentially, and that might be a price worth paying. It might not, we don't know. But for all of this, we do have to, it's not just a good idea, it is going to mean someone has to pay for it. It could mean substantially higher council tax bills for Thurrock residents. We've had those recently. I'm not saying this is something new, but how are we going to make sure that throughout this journey we do cushion that financial, if it comes to pass, how can we be sure that what sounds like a really good idea, and Councillor Kent said that in terms of local government reorganisation, it has to happen, and it does have to happen, I quite agree with that, but there is potentially, if you combine these two things together, there is a real potential cost for residents, and I think, you know, how we, throughout all this, are we going to keep in our mind that we have to make sure that, you know, over a very short period of time, we're not going to see some of, certainly the poorest people in the borough paying substantially more for all of this to come to fruition?
Well, certainly we don't want to go back to the days of kind of 10% council tax increases, 8% council tax increases. We want to do all we can to avoid that. I think it comes down to the fact that we are designing something new. It's a new authority. When in shadow form, that new authority will have to look at what services it wants to provide, how it's going to provide them, work out how much that's going to cost, and that drives the level of council tax. You know, we of course do everything we can through that to minimise the cost to residents.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from members? No? Or comments? Yeah, Councillor Jones.
Maybe one, Chair. When you talk about we're getting all this, accumulating all this data, so other authorities are doing much the same. So they all sit around and they've got all this data. Then how's the decision made that, you know, do you sit around saying, I don't mind being with you, or, you know, your figures don't look too bad, can I be with you? How, you know, I sort of ponders the question, how do we identify who we might be with?
So, you're on the money. That is broadly what we're doing at the moment in terms of just pulling all that data in there, but it's the analysis. You're absolutely right. So we already know that there are a group of authorities that have favoured the idea of moving to a 5 model. So they will look at that data with a clear objective in mind about how do we use this data to support our approach, our favoured approach. What we will be doing with some of our colleagues in Greater Essex is actually analysing this to say, well, what does the data tell us? Because you can overlay different indices here about deprivation, for example, about economic opportunity, exactly as Councillor Maney was saying. You know, what do we think is important? What would we weight? And what does the government want as well? You know, they have set a criteria when they invited us to reorganise local government, and they said, write a business case, and this is the criteria around financial sustainability, about the geography of your area, how you work with communities. So if you look at it through that lens, you can start to see a picture that's emerging that you think is one that is sustainable. And let's be honest, there is a part of this which is around the numbers, and there's part of this which is about what do we think is deliverable. And it's the politics. This is local government. There is politics involved in this. But it's about making sure that we have something that works for the communities as a whole. And it is that evidence-based, it is that feedback about that sense of place. And together you can come together with what you think is the right structure for local government. But it is, it's not an easy thing to do, I won't lie. And you can't just rely on the data. But a picture emerges with the data. And then you have to test those assumptions about whether that feels right. Well, you consult with people. Does this seem sensible? And you do come up with an answer as to how you think you should restructure local government, or at least we hope we do.
Councillor Abbas.
Just a quick one. Alex, I think you did mention, we all know we are in debts, you know, but just somewhere behind the line, we don't want to kind of end up saying, look, you know, because we are in financial difficulties or we are in debts. So, because the best way forward for us is to go for these things, you know, or just looking at someone, because just looking at someone else's data saying, look, you know, because the 5 authorities have selected this model and we are in debt, so this is also best for us. But can we just make sure, because at this stage, what it looks like from this, they're not going to exclude us from this consultation or conversation because we are in debt, so they're going to exclude us, leave it wherever we are. So I think what we need to do is we need to see what is best for Thurrock rather than looking at other authorities' models. If 4 or 5s are saying this is the best for them, so it does not mean it would be best for us or for our residents. So I think we need to make it very, very clear, even though we have debts, we have bad financial situation, but they're not going to exclude us. So we have some positive points. So considering these things, I think that I'm sure you must be considering these points and taking these forward, you know. So I hope you will consider these things, you know, when we are discussing this and taking this further.
Completely, we are. I mean, the easiest thing for Thurrock to do would be go with the flow. But we didn't. You know, we were given really good, strong, clear cover from the leader that actually we're going to be evidence-led here. We're going to look at what works for Thurrock, and we will stand there, do this work, and come up with something that works for Thurrock and our neighbours. And that is what we are doing.
Can I just say, one of the kind of effects of being an intervention is that I think we in Thurrock know our council and the situation of our council better and in more detail than any other authority across Essex. You know, we know our financial position, warts and all. Almost everybody else knows it as well, warts and all, because we've been open, honest, transparent. We've had to delve into it. We know where we are in a way that others don't. And I think others, as they start to compile their data, their evidence, are actually surprised about what they're finding on their own doorstep. The other thing I will say is that we are speaking from a position of real strength. You know, we are an upper tier authority that delivers more services than Essex County Council and has done for the last, you know, whatever it is, 28 years now. We know how to do this stuff. We are engaging on an equal footing with some authorities. We've got a budget of, you know, what is it, £164 million. We're engaging on the same footing with authorities that have a budget of £11 million a year. You know, we are in a real position of strength here, and we're going to make sure that we use that to get the best deal we can for the men and women who live in Thurrock.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we've everybody said what they want to say at this stage. We are at a very early stage, obviously, so in terms of meat on the bones, there's not an awful lot for us to look at, but I think it was right that we end this municipal year, this committee ends this municipal year having looked at this. I certainly think that in the new municipal year, I think that the new committee, we've got Councillor Holloway's recommendation. I think personally, just to begin with, I think, and obviously it'll be for the new committee to decide whether they want to do this, I think this should be a standing item on the agenda for every corporate ONS committee. Even, it might be that there is nothing to report, but it's there. It might be that a written report or a briefing note is more appropriate than a verbal presentation, but I do think, well, I don't think this committee would really be fulfilling its role if it didn't. This is the biggest thing that's going to happen in Thurrock for decades in terms of local government and how our services are delivered. And I think, you know, we're obligated to, you know, satisfy ourselves at every meeting that evidence, but principally that you're talking about, that we think it is the right evidence, that we think officers are going about collating it in the right way, and then it's explained to us. So I think our second recommendation is that this becomes a standing item, and it'll be for the new committee to decide whether or not it wants to take that forward. But I think it is exciting. I mean, you know, we'll have differing views, I'm sure, and residents will have differing views. But it is an exciting time, and there is opportunity, a real opportunity here for Thurrock and Thurrock residents. So we look forward to seeing how that process rolls out. In terms of the recommendation, I think we've done that. I don't think we need to sort of formally agree. We have scrutinised, we have commented. So thank you, Alex. Thank you, Councillor Kent, for coming and presenting this paper. It's much appreciated. So we're moving on to item 5, which is the work programme. As I said, we're at the end of the municipal year, so there isn't anything coming down the track, so to speak. So I think we can note that if everybody's happy. Same with the other two items. Item 6, the action log and recommendation tracker. I've got no specific comments. We're happy to note that. Okay, thank you very much. So it is 29 minutes past 8, and I will close the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance.